Hey guys, so right out of the gate, there is a major elephant in the room to talk about with this episode, which is they skipped the entirety of Team Flower's fight, which, granted, it didn't contribute a lot to the story in the manga other than to serve as a sort of transition into the next big phase of the story, I guess. But at the same time, it also showcased just how it that the fight in itself, I think, did good. Also, it's showcasing just how dangerously powerful those three girls are. And by cutting it out, well, I'm not gonna say it. Well, I'm not. Well, by cutting it out, I feel, well, probably building up a little mystique further. It also just kind of it kind of does it just kind of undervalues them as a threat in my mind, just by not showing their fight, and it it almost kind of puts them on a very similar, but by cutting out so much of Team Flower, it does kind of put them on a very similar level to from which that of what their role was in the original anime. So, like, if you want people to take these girls seriously, then you gotta show how powerful they are, or it's just gonna feel jarring. Now, with that said, I think I know why the studio like did what they did, and they cut out this scene because why they cut out that whole fight, because the fight in itself, honestly, is rather gruesome, and while not necessarily out of the realm of what we've seen up to this point, one scene I think that I think that it definitely influenced the decision to cut out that fight is, and the reason why it got pulled out of the adaptation is there's a scene where one of the girls, the one whose ghost is that stitched up doll, pulls out a gun and shoots her opponent through the head. And again, it's one of those weird things where even though they showed even though we still got to see the actual aftermath of the shooting in this episode, it's kind of one of those things where when you take into account Japan's whole weird stance on guns, they probably didn't want to show the actual shooting in itself. Like, if you did research on Japan's gun laws, you'll pretty much know that you've got a whole weird thing about it. And I think, and while I'm not going to say that that's the entire reason as to why they cut out that fight, I'm sure part of it was for pacing. I think I wouldn't be surprised if like the shooting in itself was at least part of the reason why it was cut. Knowing that, though, one of the big turning points of this episode is we see how basically massacre the remaining X-Laws, save for Marco, who he himself also gets killed later on by the brother of Team Nile. And yeah, honestly, yeah, like I was it's kind of weird because with the X-Laws, it's kind of weird because I definitely cared more about what happened to them here in this episode, what happened to them here than I did in the original anime, but not enough to get emotional either. Like I will say like Marco's death, I think, affected me the most, but as far as like the other X-Laws, again, they're kind of in that weird space where I definitely cared about their deaths more here, and they definitely went out swinging. But as far on an emotion, I can't say I was like emotionally connected to them either. So it's weird. Like I cared about them more, but not enough to get emotional about their deaths. I will say the whole scene of Hal getting engulfed by the laser that shit was kind of fucking terrifying, honestly. So yeah, good on them. Good on the animators for that, making me fear Hal more there. And yeah, but obviously the big thing of the episode is Ganhara's confrontation with Yo's team, where they basically send Yo to essentially the underworld, where he's forced to confront his trial of becoming one of the five great spirits. And it's here where he's also confronted by his ancestor Yoken. And honestly, this is one area where I feel the anime had a bit of a rough task, because in the manga, there was so much more like detail to Yoken's, like, not only his appearance, but just he had this physical presence of a monster of someone of a true like monster or psychopath in the anime, and don't get me wrong, he did have his moments in this episode, but in the manga he was just so much more imposing and terrifying. Honestly, here I don't want to say he was just average, but he just kind of had the presence of every other villain. Um, although although one thing I liked about this confrontation in itself is it showed Yo like the power of the will of the spirit, and how it's not enough to just have a strong will. You need to know, as a shaman, you need to know how to harness that willpower into physical power as well. Like something that when you look at how he's pretty much mastered how to harness his willpower into physical power over the countless centuries. And here with Yo, but by learning to harness his willpower into spiritual and physical power, he was not only able to he's not only able to fix find a different way in order of fighting, but it's basically allowed him to conquer. And but through that we also get the reveal of his new oversoul, and through that we also get the reveal of his new oversoul. And the scary part is what Yo did in this episode. He's only conquered the first step. From here, it's basically is learning to actually use what he's learned in order to become one of the elemental warriors now, as Gantara said. And before I forget, one thing I do want to mention is just how weirdly paced this episode was, because it started off pretty good in how they streamlined the material, but then after that, halfway through, it was kind of off in how it was focusing on one moment before cutting away to another. And again, it's one of those things where where it doesn't necessarily ruin the pacing or flow of the episode, but it didn't leave much room for you to soak in a moment either. So it's kind of weird in that sense. With that said, we get a scene in the beginning of the episode that honestly really makes me wish even more that these versions of Iron Maiden, Jean, and Lyserg were in the original anime, because just this very quiet scene of both characters reflecting on their actions and what has led them to this point is something that, for as simple as the conversation in itself is, it really adds more emotional nuance than I just never got out of either of these characters when I was watching the original anime. I mean, with Lyserg, just seeing him question his actions more and reflect on just him trying to find an answer and understand what the correct path for him to take in the moment, and just him understanding that How does need to be defeated, but he doesn't know how to do, just questioning how can he truly justify that in a way where it does feel like justice and not revenge. I really like this kind of emotional back and this very emotional back and forth that Lyser's going through, compared to whatever the hell they were it shows a lot more emotional maturity in the character than whatever the hell they were doing with him in the original anime. I'll just say straight up, looking at Lyserg in this version compared to the original anime, the original anime kind of just butchered Lyserg. It makes me realize that. On the other side of the spectrum, though, we also have Jean, whose character growth is a little more subtle, but you can see how she's not only mourning the loss of her comrades more, but she's also just lamenting on the actions of the X-Laws as well as her own, and accepting of the fact that Jean has blood on her hands, and that once everything is all said and done, there are things that she has to atone for, because no matter how righteous the cause of the X-Laws was, the fact still remains they've killed people. And I love how that kind of crystallized in being confronted by the brother of one of the members of Team Nile, a team they killed. Jean in that moment was genuinely afraid, which, compare that to the original anime, where honestly she felt just cold and callous towards everyone and everything right up until the end. Whereas here there's just more there's just more sense of a remorseful attitude with it all. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone.